My name is Destinee King. My story is going to be about me surviving being molested by a pastor who was formerly my goddad. Growing up, my dad was not around. I lived with a single parent, my mother. We also lived in my grandparents' house. A regular month would be 14 to 16 people living in the house itself. I was typically the black sheep. I was young at the time, but I was the one which had to do everything, taking care of the kids, sure that dinner was served. I was kind of the mother in the household, even though I did have my grandmother and I did have my mom there. When I was young, I was very depressed. I felt alone. The only thing that I know best was to go into the bathroom, lock myself, and just sit there in silence, or I sat there and prayed. There was one particular day when I was just crying out about my dad. I wish my dad was here. Don't have anybody. My mom, she's working. I don't have any focus on me. No one's paying attention to me. I'm crying out, but it's like no one's hearing me. So growing up, my first love was fighting. Me and my siblings, we did not get along. I had an older brother. He was still finding himself. He was 6 years older than me. My sister, she's about 5 or 4 years older than me. Me and her never got along. We were always fighting. My little brother, he was young, so he didn't know what he was doing was affecting me. He would say little stuff like that I was adopted. My sister would say that I was left on the doorstep and that's not really my mom. So I had a lot of things that I was going through as a child. I remember the first time that I started to like boys. My mom had went through my phone and she seen me texting one. And I remember her calling me, saying all types of stuff about me. My sister, at the time, she was laughing about it, and my mom ended up telling me to leave. Around that time, I was 8 or 9. She told me to leave the house, and it was dark at night. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I ended up going into the laundry room, prepared to sleep there. Maybe about 5 or 10 minutes after my mom came in with my sister and told me to come back into the house. So when I was around about 8 to 10 years old, I lived in an apartment with my grandmother and my grandfather. It was a 3-bedroom apartment with over 14 people, and that was a regular month. We were pretty much scattered around the house. We slept where we could. Some difficulties that came with being in a household full of people was honestly getting overlooked. No one paid attention to me. I was always the outer cast. My little cousin, when she was born, my auntie first had her. I was the one taking care of her. I bathed her. So it was somewhat I played a huge mother role while living in my grandparents' apartment. I really didn't have any help, and when I did vent to like my grandfather or other people, it was like he heard me, but no action was taken. I wanted someone to take action for me. I was so young at the time that my voice really didn't matter. I wanted someone that was older to speak out for me. Say how it looks to you. Say how you think it's making me feel, but I never had anyone do that. So I fell into a deep depression and I just felt alone. When I was younger, I was about 5 or 6, an apartment that we lived in. The last altercation that I remember with my parents was one day when my mom and dad, they were arguing. My mom just yelling at him, telling him to leave, and he was saying, call the police. And it was getting very vulgar. They were at each other's throat, and I was like so young at the time. All I knew was to pick up the phone and call the police. And as soon as I picked up the phone, my mother, she grabbed the phone and she hung it up. Lo and behold, the police did end up coming out. They escorted him off the premises. After that, I don't ever remember me, my mom, and my siblings, and my dad living in a household together. We always went from place to place. And even when I did try to get in contact with my dad, he would either get a new phone or something happened when that phone was turned off, and I'll run into my aunts. They would give me his new telephone number, but it was always me and my little brother chasing after him. My 2 older siblings, they have different dads from us, so it was really just me and my brother that dealt with the trauma from my mother and my father, like not being together in the same household. My mom, she was a full-time worker. She was never really around. It was kind of an odd relationship between her and my grandmother. They never really seen eye to eye. So my mom tried to stay away as much as she could to keep the peace, because when she wasn't there, they were either talking about her. So it was always something going on in the household to where there wasn't ever any peace. And then my great-grandparents, they came to live with us. More individuals into the household, and my grandparents moved into the living room with me. So everyone else just scattered as far as they could. My dad wasn't around. My dad ended up getting into a relationship with another lady, and they had my little sister. One occasion where we kept reaching out to him and he finally said, we can come over. We went over and I remember seeing my dad and his new girlfriend and their daughter, my sister, and I just remember feeling so empty because I knew that I would never be able to experience that again with my parents in one household. After that, I didn't see my dad anymore. It was strictly phone calls. I would call him. Sometimes he would answer, sometimes he wouldn't. My brother, he just totally drifted away. It got to the point like when my mom, she would talk bad about him and she would say, your dad doesn't care about you. Your dad doesn't love you. If he did, he would be here. That took a a huge toll on me because I felt like I was defending this person who's not here, but I love so much. It was kind of hard because I dealt with resentment towards my mom. She didn't give me a chance to know my dad for myself. She only down talked him in that sense. It was very hard. I wanted a father figure so bad. Even though my grandfather, he was in the picture, there was so many of us in the household. There was so many kids, so many of my cousins there, that he couldn't just focus on being a father to me. And he had his own problems that he was dealing with. So it couldn't just be on me. It couldn't just be one-on-one time with me. And if it was a quick second. We went to the store and came back home. I didn't really have anybody. One day I was in the restroom and I was just crying and I was just like, God, I just want my dad back in my life. At that time I was starting to give up on God. I was over the fact of praying and not hearing anything, not seeing anything come to pass. And then one day I had went to church. I decided, okay, I'll go. So I went with my grandmother and my mom. I sat next to my mom, and I remember it was this guest pastor. My great-grandmother, she was the pastor, and my grandfather, he was the bishop. So when we sat there, he had preached, and it was nothing out of the normal because we always had guest speakers. So he had preached, and after that, he had did an altar call. So he called the people up who wanted to get prayer. I sat still. My mom said, go get prayer for your older brother. I said, Mom, I don't want to go get prayer. She said, you're being disobedient. And that was the last thing I wanted to be. I did not want to be disobedient to my mom. So I got up and I went up there and he asked me what I needed prayer for. And I told him I needed prayer for my older brother. He prayed strictly only about me. It was like he only talked about me. He only talked about what I was going through. So I thought, okay, God, you're hearing my prayer. You're listening to me. You're showing me that you hear me and that I'm not alone. As he was praying for me, I was just crying like so hard because it's like I'm finally getting recognized. Somebody is finally understanding me. God has finally sent someone who gets where I'm coming from and not overlooking me. So after church, my mom thanked them for praying for me. At that time, they were talking about becoming my godparents. So my mom was thrilled about it. She was happy about it, and she gave them the okay. So they became my godparents. I began to speak to my goddad every day. Me and him spoke every day. He was reading the word, teaching me the Bible. We talked every day. That was like my best friend. His wife, we talked on occasion. When she got home, me and her were talking as well, but not as much as me and my godfather. Ended up starting middle school down the street from my grandparents' house. I remember one day where I was talking to him on the phone and he began to say, when you get a husband, you make sure that you cover him and you make sure that you fulfill all his needs. I said, okay. So he had asked me if I was a virgin at school, and I stated yes. He said, good. You don't need to be out here doing what the other little girls are doing. You have your head on track. He was just saying how it's good that I'm not doing what other kids are doing. I felt good. I'm like, okay, finally someone recognizes that I'm not doing what other people are doing and I'm trying to do good. Him and his wife were on the phone at the time, and they both said that I can come over and his youngest daughter would be there. My dad talked to my mom about it. She said that was okay because the younger daughter was going to be there. I remember I packed my bags and I was just so excited to go. They were saying how I would have my own room and how I wouldn't have to worry about sleeping on the floor or in the living room. I would have my own space. So they picked me up, and I remember the long drive to San Bernardino, and I was just happy just looking out the window. I remember passing by the college going to his house. And when we got there, it was this huge dark house, and I remember on the side of it, it was a dog that was barking, and he introduced the dog to me, and the dog's name was Bishop. His wife walked us in. They grabbed my bags and helped me go in, and I remember the wife going directly upstairs and going to get in the shower because she had work the next day. I noticed that the daughter wasn't there. I was kind of confused as to why she wasn't there, but I didn't say anything about it. He proceeded with saying that he would give me a tour of the house. The first thing we did, we went into the kitchen. It was right next to the living room. On the side of it, it was a sliding door which led you to the backyard. From there was a hallway, which was his downstairs restroom. Then we went upstairs. He showed me where my restroom would be, the room that I would be sleeping in, their room, and the extra room. I remember going into the room that I was sleeping on, and there was a teddy bear on the bed, and the sheets and the covers were red and black. I'm just looking like, wow, I have my own room finally. I'll be able to sleep in my own bed because I never experienced having a bed. Always slept on the floor. So we went back downstairs, and I remember him saying that he was going to go ahead and change because he had on, it looked looked like church clothes. So he went back upstairs, and I remember sitting on there just ecstatic, like happy that I was finally had peace and quiet. Finally, I have my own room. I sat down, and I remember him coming back down in basketball shorts, and I remember him forcing himself on me to perform oral sex. After that, I remember going upstairs and just crying, and I grabbed the teddy bear that was on the bed, and I just cried, and I just stayed up the whole night just thinking, what happened to me? I remember it hit about 5 or 6 in the morning, hearing them go downstairs, and he was taking her to work, and I just sat there, and then I heard the front door close, and I ran into the restroom, used the restroom, and I laid back in the same space that I was in. I heard the door open again, and he was back from taking her, holding my breath, trying to hear if he was coming up the stairs to come into the room. And I remember him coming into the room, and he was naked from head to toe, and he had something in his hand. I didn't know what it was, just sitting in bed in a corner, just balled up, and he told me to get up. He stood up, he laid a towel on the bed, and he proceeded to rape me. He had put something on me, and it was lube, just crying and telling him, get off of me, stop. And then he finally stopped, and he just walked out of the room. I remember going into the bathroom and getting in the shower, just standing there bawling my eyes out, crying full of tears. I had went back in the room, and he went back in his room and closed the door. I stayed in the room all day. It was time for me to go home, and the car ride was so silent, I don't even remember saying anything to anyone. After I got back home, I was completely different. I didn't say anything to anybody. I was more angrier than ever. My attitude was just skyrocket. It was just horrible. I didn't know what happened to me. So after that, I didn't really see him until there was an occasion where my mom ended up, I don't know if it was an altercation between her and my grandmother, but we ended up leaving, and we ended up sleeping in the car. We slept in a car in Upland, California until my mom found a place. So we slept in there for, I would say, months before I was just getting ready to head into high school. That was basically around summertime. We sat in the car, and we would get up each morning. We would go to McDonald's. We would change our clothes there, brush our teeth, come back to the car, and just get on the road. We would go with my mom to work. From work, we're right back finding a little street that we can sleep on. And then eventually they ended up saying that I could go live with them. And that was the most terrifying time of my life, but yet I felt that it was normal. I never knew what a dad was supposed to be, so I thought this was normal. It wasn't always just me being molested. There were times where they would buy me stuff for my birthday. They got me my first cake. I never had a cake for my birthday. That was the first time that I actually experienced that. I didn't know that what was going on was wrong. I was so young, I didn't understand the difference between a real father and a predator. It was just normal. They treated me like their child. I always wondered, how would she feel if she found out? Would she be upset? How would she feel? I don't want to ruin their happy home if I was to come to her and tell her, because I wanted to tell her what was going on. But then again, it's like, I'm not really your child, so how would you lash out on me? I'm not yours, really. One time, me and him were having a conversation on the phone, and he had said something inappropriate, and she got super mad, and she said, who are you talking to? And he said, I'm talking to Destinee. And she grabs the phone. She's like, oh, hi, Destinee. From then I'm like, oh, she must know what's going on underneath her nose. So I never said anything, and I never thought to tell her after that. There was a time where her son was getting married. Their children, they treated me like I was their own sibling. The first time when they came out, and they just clinged to me, treated me like I belonged. They loved me, and that's something that I didn't have with my sibling. Me and my sibling, there was always back and forth. There was always fighting. It was never any peace. I had siblings. I had people that I can talk to. I had people that were around my age. We all eventually ended up going to Atlanta to visit his son's wedding. We went to Atlanta. I was like, okay, good. The abuse is going to stop. But it didn't stop. He began to find different ways to say, okay, Destinee, come with me here. And the abuse continued right under, again, his wife's nose and his children's nose. No one ever knew. I ended up going back with my mom just to visit, and we were still in the car. I mean, my sister at the time, she was going to school to become an assistant dental. And I remember going in to go charge my phone. I came back out, and my mom said, well, your godmom, she texted me and said her job is done and that you had to get your stuff and you had to leave. So I was confused. I'm like, what happened, and what does she mean her job is done? So I called my godfather, and I told him what my mom stated and what the message had stated. He said, I didn't hear anything about that, and she's right here with me. Let me talk to her and I'll call you back. He called me back. He said that she never said that. And I asked my mom to see the message, but she said she deleted it. But my sister says she's seen it as well. So it was kind of hard to believe it, because here I am with people that I'm always battling with, always in arguments, going back and forth with, and they're telling me something that I didn't want to hear. My mom said, you can go back. I ended up going back, and I got my stuff. Still didn't work out. I ended up going back again because we were still living in a car. When I went back, I remember telling him that I didn't want to do this anymore, and I felt that it was wrong. And I remember he pulled out a gun on me. He was mimicking him shooting me in my head. He told me that if I left him, this is what would happen. So after that, I never said anything else again. As I started my new school, my high school in Upland, I stayed to myself. I was very quiet, didn't have any friends, and the people that I did talk to, I felt like we didn't click because I was going through so much. I felt like nobody understood me on that level. And I feel like when you have been molested and raped, your mindset changes and you mature a lot quicker, like into an adult's mindset. So I didn't have anybody who understood me or clicked with me or got what I was going through. When I went to church and when he had prayed for me, I was 12 years old. The abuse didn't start till I was 13, and that's when I first went to their house. It was around about my birthday. It continued on till I was almost 16 years old. The church that he was pastoring at, because we ended up getting a church in Pasadena, he ended up doing Bible studies, and that was at nighttime. I remember he always told me to come. He would always ask my mom if I could come. My mom always said yes. So I would go, we would go to Bible study, and then he would drop me back off at home. But before he would drop me back off at home, he would abuse me and then drop me back off at home. I got to a point where I was like, okay, I don't want to go anymore. So I remember I used to lie, and I used to tell him, my mom said I can't go with you. And he would get mad. He would call my mom and ask her, why can't I go? And then my mom would say, no, she can go. I never said that. But eventually I feel as if my mom began to catch on, because she eventually started saying no, that I could not go. And then I stopped going. I got at my first job. It was at John's Incredible Pizza. He would pop up at my job. He would try to tell me to come out of my job so he could molest me outside of my job. But I tried to stop it with saying that I had something to do with my job and that I couldn't come out. So he can feel me drifting away. I remember towards the end of me coming out, before I came out about my story, he had texted me, he had apologized. But after he apologized, the abuse still continued. But he was very sympathetic. He said that he was sorry that this was happening. And then I remember one time after he had got done molesting me, he ended up laughing and telling me a story about how he was younger and how he was molested by this older lady. And he laughed and laughed about it. And he said how his mom knew and the people in his family knew, but no one did anything. He said that it was multiple women that had molested him when he was about 5 or 6 years old. So after living with my godparents, tax season had came around. It hit January. My mom ended up finding an apartment right near my school, down the street from my school. So we moved in there, and then I ended up telling my mom, and I ended up coming forth about what was going on. Me and my sister were arguing, and she was saying how I'm probably being fast and I'm probably having sex with boys at school, and that's why I'm so argumentative and so angry. And I ended up yelling out, I said, Mom, I'm being molested, I'm being raped. And I just broke down into tears, and my little brother was sitting there, and my mom was saying, Destinee, I have neighbors, you need to be quiet. My brother said, Mom, did you not just hear what she said? Listen to her. And my mom was like, Destinee, she kept saying how they could hear us next door. So I ended up telling her that I was leaving and I wasn't coming back. So I grabbed what I could and I left. Then after I went to my friend's house, I ended up telling my friend, and my friend ended up saying that I can live with her. I told her a little bit about what happened, but I never told her who it was or who the individual was to me. I ended up telling Raymond, who I was talking to at the time, a boy from school. His mom ended up allowing me to come over there and stay with them. I stayed with them, and I told him everything. I told him who it was, how it happened, what age I was. I told him everything. He ended up encouraging me to tell my mom. One day, me and my mom, we had to go down to the court office. And when I went there, I sat down with the lady, and she asked me what's going on with me? What's wrong? And I ended up breaking down, and I was crying, and I told her what happened to me. She told me I needed to tell my mom. I have to tell my mom. I said, I already did. She's not listening to me. She said, no, you have to tell her. So she calls her in, and I told my mom, Mom, I'm being molested by this man. She said, by that man? And I said, yes, by that man. And she just breaks down into tears. She said, thank you for telling me. In my mind, I'm like, I did tell you, Mom. I came clean. I told you what was going on when we were at the house. And I began to second guess myself. I'm like, okay, maybe I didn't. I wasn't clear about what happened. Maybe I didn't. But I'm like, my brother said something. My brother heard it. And my brother told her that she wasn't listening to me. But I just let it go. If you want to hear me now, you can hear me now, is what I was thinking. My mom, I remember leaving there. When we got there, I remember her walking up and down the street, and she had called my aunt, and she was telling her what happened. And she was like, what should I do? And she said, you need to handle this the right way. You need to go forth with pressing charges. When I was 16 years old, I remember my mom had took me down to the police station to file a report. They brought me back, and then they had me tell them from the beginning to the end what happened. Then at the end of me telling them what happened, they asked me if I had any evidence, anything that would support my case. And I remember telling them his laptop, he has a black laptop. I remember him uploading everything on there. Everything is on there. And I told them about the guns, what color they were. And then when I was going through the abuse, he would take out his phone and he would record me. I remember one particular time he had broken his phone. And when he had broke his phone, he wanted to have all his photos, all his videos. So we had went to a Starbucks and he helped him upload everything to his computer. Then when I went to talk to the police, I told him where he usually keeps it, how it may be in his closet or it may be in his bathroom. And then I described the guns that he had. So when they went to his house, the attorney called me and she told me that they found everything and they have all of the evidence. And then she told me that they were going to proceed with the case. And then eventually she ended up calling me again and she said another little girl went through something similar with him, but she was unconscious, so they couldn't pursue the charges against him. She said, but with you, we're going to make sure we go all the way. So when she said that, I felt relieved because I felt, okay, I'm not alone. They ended up pressing charges and I didn't have to speak at the court hearing. I didn't have to say anything. They did give me the option to speak, but I declined it. But he's now facing 15 years in prison. He's still currently in prison. Me and my family, I ended up having 2 girls. We moved out to Las Vegas and we are excelling. It was nothing but the hand of God. I'm now 20 years old. I have my own family and I can say I'm fully healed now. And I just wanted to share my story to let other individuals know that there's other survivors out there. They are not alone.